everyone. I'm happy to virtually welcome you all to today's Ad Art Show 2020 Lunchtime POV from MvVO Art. My name is Emily Anastasi from the MvVO Art team, and it's my pleasure to introduce the next episode of a series hosted by Erica Wong of To Practice Practice and Alexis Hyde of Southport, LA. What is out there other than Instagram? Welcome, everyone. Let's get started.
Thank you. Hey, Erica.
Hi, Alexis. How's it going?
Good. How's it going with you?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I was actually just reading this article about this blurred line between commercial and digital art spaces, which I thought it was a really good point to think about before we started this workshop. So I think I'm just going to throw that out there because, we've had this discussion for a little while now where artists actually look at Instagram for resources, inspiration. However, in art school, there are actually teachers who say that is unacceptable. Like that is just not the place that you should be looking. We are still very much in the world of we need to look at books. And I love books, don't get me wrong, but I do think that in the world of digital, it is how do we actually straddle between both worlds?
I mean, I think, because I know I've been hearing anecdotally too of professors who are saying don't engage in social media, don't, look to those places. But I mean, in my opinion, that's the same thing as people saying that photography is not art or, video isn't art, just because they're so stuck in painting and sculpture that they can't see what these new tools can give us, because they're neutral tools at the end of the day. Instagram, they're just to be used. And so if you were an artist, why wouldn't you want to have a broader arsenal of tools to be using for research purposes, for, let's be honest, you got your PhD. Did you do some of your research online?
I did 99% of my research online.
So if it's good enough for your PhD, I would think it should be good enough for some artists. And I think that some of that research can absolutely happen on Instagram. I know quite a few collectors who are looking on social media and online for art. I know curators, myself included. I troll Instagram, literally just search through different social medias. I'm very engaged on TikTok right now as a tool. And that started in my Tumblr days. I mean, I connected with all kinds of artists all around the world. I talked with an artist I met through Tumblr who's in Berlin this morning. It's a communication tool, and it can be for interpersonal relationships, and it can be for marketing purposes or research purposes. So I think that I can see the point of view of people who think that we shouldn't be doing that because it's new and that's scary, and books are great and books are incredible resources, but that doesn't mean we can't do both.
I think especially because different countries are now in lockdown, out of lockdown, going back into lockdown, like this country right now.
Yeah.
How else are you supposed to go and access things, especially if you're trying to go and look for people who aren't physically around you, and I think that that's really important. I think as we've spoken about previously, that sense of the research, yes. How else would you have access if you're not using something digitally? So
exactly, because especially now, not every city is in a place where their libraries are open, even schools. You can't access these libraries. So you're cutting your nose off to spite your face. So, and there's amazing conversations happening online, in Instagram comment threads, on Twitter, on TikTok. These are places where people are able to gather now. We don't have forums, we don't have events where we can gather and talk about these things, and we're doing it online. And I think people will argue that this is just temporary because of the current climate of COVID, but I would argue that once you've opened this box, it's not going to close. And I would also argue that the box wasn't actually closed before either.
So I think a lot of people engage with art digitally through Instagram as a source.
Yeah.
What else is out there other than Instagram? You had mentioned TikTok.
TikTok is great. I know that there's concerns about it otherwise, but I think that it's a great tool for connecting and for showcasing your work, especially if you're not just a 2D artist. If you do performance or video, I think it can be, or digital, it can be a really great place. It's also a great place to like learn and talk about your practice and see what other people are doing, and that's an exciting space. Something that's kind of basic that is digital that people don't think about is your email list. If you have an email list and you have a newsletter, one of my favorite newsletters is a photographer out of New York named Noah Kalina, and he just sends out an email every week, and it's some photos he's been taking, what's been going on. I mean, he's very clever and he's very smart, which is like really fun, but it's also really great to see the process of an artist who lives in the country in New York with his chickens and what's going on with the trees. And that's honestly what the email list is, and whatever creative thing that he's doing or new job. And it's great because if I see it come into my inbox, I'll read it, and then he's top of mind. If somebody's like, do you know anybody who's doing X, or I'm looking for landscape photography, I'm like, oh, Noah Kalina is, and I know that because I got an email from him. Not everybody needs a weekly email, but we did a podcast for our podcast, an interview with Christina Hirakawa, who's an art advisor here in LA on Hyder Practice, and she was talking about that, that kind of outreach through like email is super vital to her being able to stay in touch with people, and how convenient it is for her, because then when some opportunities arise, you're there and right there in the mind.
I think the goodness is also that it's not always the finished piece of work. I think there's like that mentality of thinking, or like the really old school way of thinking, a portfolio. And the only thing that can be classified as a piece of work that can be shown is a finished piece of work. And a work in progress is, like, I don't know if I would be comfortable with showing a piece of work that's like in progress.
Yeah.
I can hear that, like, from this newsletter, it's like, it's totally okay for you to go and document the things that are inspiring you, that you see, and that sense of the journey. Because, not very long ago, I was actually hearing some data that was saying that blogging is actually coming back.
It is.
And blogging actually is driving more eyes and traffic than, say, something like Instagram when you're talking about conversion rates. So conversion rates, like selling, I know that might be a little bit too commercial, but in terms of actually having data and using that, I think it's really useful that sometimes metrics don't convert, meaning that you may not get as many eyes as you think you will or you hope for on Instagram, whereas something like a mail list or making a personalized newsletter actually might have a better outreach than you think.
Exactly, because that's the thing. When you're posting something on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, on Tumblr, wherever those kinds of social media, or Facebook, we all know that we're kind of a victim of the algorithm, which we also know changes. We don't know are they promoting engagement? Are they promoting different words? Like what's going on? So you do have, and you can kind of gauge those metrics, and that's great. But it's not necessarily a guarantee, and it's not always a replacement for, one-to-one, which you can also use these platforms for. You can message people and you can comment on their Instagrams, and you can comment on their TikToks when you like see them, and you can develop relationships like that. And that's really great. And you can do that kind of outreach, and you can find their email addresses. And that's also a great way to, do that kind of outreach. So it's not just about pure marketing of like, here is my finished product, or even just like, here is my process. It's about finding a community, building your community, and doing outreach and networking, and that can help you build your practice as well. And it doesn't also have to be completely commercially based, of like trying to reach out collectors or galleries or curators. I mean, you can reach out to other artists, like who's doing something cool, like are you, and growing your network like that, and learning and researching in that way also.
No, for sure. And it's a two-way street, that insofar as you can see them, they can see you. So like, don't forget that, like, when you're posting stuff or you're creating this newsletter, is that you're reaching out to them, but it's also, you need to think about how you want other people to engage with you as well. And I feel like as an artist, that's something that I never thought about in the past until like quite recently.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because it is, I was talking to an artist about this yesterday actually, and they're like, how do I, approach somebody? And I'm like, how do you want to be seen? They're like, how many works do I need to approach somebody? I'm like, how do you want to be seen? And this is the narrative you want to tell about yourself. This is where you have control. Do you want to be an artist that is super prolific and is making 150 pieces a year? Then you need to come with 50 pieces. So somebody can, like, even if they're not going to look through it, they can swipe through your iPad or whatever and see that you've produced something. Do you want to be somebody who's only making 12 pieces a year? Great, then don't show up with 100. You better only have 3. Do you want to be someone who's known as a photographer of socially conscious portraiture? Then show up with that and have that on your Instagram. So when someone's seeking you out, they can easily see the story that you're trying to tell. And it's not bad to have a specific artist only Instagram, an artist only Facebook, an artist only whatever, to be different for your, your fun, your personal stuff, because it is hard as a curator who's looking for something. If I were to come onto your Instagram where I do engage, and 90 pictures of the last 100 are of parties or of sunsets or of whatever other fun of your food, which is great content and I love it, I'm not going to know anything about you as an artist, but I will know about you as a person, which isn't a bad thing, but it's not what I'm looking for.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think it's really important to think about that narrative of what you want people to, or like anybody who's not you, to understand what your practice is, what you're reading, what you're writing, who you're reaching out to. All those things come down to you putting together like a package of what you are. And that doesn't necessarily always work on Instagram, because I think that Instagram has a very specific function. However, and this is like very much what this workshop is talking about, is that in the digital realm or the digital space, it's not always Instagram that dictates how we navigate the digital world. So having that control actually probably can help with what your practice is and what you stand for, and make it very clear for other people as well, what is your practice? What are you doing? What makes you relevant? How are you approaching curators? How are you dealing with dealers? How are you outreaching? Like, those things are all really important.
Exactly. And it does go across platforms. I mean, the newer the platform, I don't think a lot of people are engaging on Byte right now. That would help you with your, gallery practice. But if you're looking for other artists and inspiration, then Byte is a great place to go. And so it's just, also like, that's the same thing as like knowing about your tools. Like, is this a knife or is this a fork? They have two different purposes, but they're both very useful. So how are you going to be using your fork and your knife when you're trying to present yourself, or when you're trying to learn, or when you're trying to connect? And just because someone else is doing it one way doesn't mean that you have to. But another good piece of advice that Christina had when we interviewed her was look to artists that you admire. Yes. See where they are and see what they're doing. Like, if this is someone whose career that you admire and this is someone you respect and you see them engaging in, something in one way, like that might be a really nice note to take of like, okay, this is how they're engaging their email list. This is how they're engaging their Instagram. And that's, that's it's nice to have those kind of, we've had social media and digital things long enough now, in a way that we didn't even a couple of years ago, that enough people are on there that you can, you can kind of see, and it's a little bit less Wild West. There's a little bit more control, which is just helpful if you're going in cold.
No, definitely. So I hope that that's been helpful in terms of talking about what exists other than Instagram, because I think that there's so much that we just think like Instagram is the be all and end all, and it's not. So I really hope that that's been helpful. Thank you.